My daughter raised her glass at brunch and laughed. He won't sign because he knows he's almost gone, he's dragging us down with him. The entire diner froze. A few nearby tables chuckled. The waitress returned with the check, and my name printed on it was deceased. She had never said words like this before. So why now? If they thought this was the end of me, they'd forgotten what I still had in my folder. Backhand index pointing right. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where you're watching from right now. The folder was missing from its drawer, and my daughter was waiting for me in the living room. I pushed the door open, still carrying the bitter aftertaste of the diner's silence. My boots echoed against the hardwood floor, but it wasn't the empty house I was used to. She was already here. My daughter sat on the couch with her arms crossed, the life insurance folder spread open across the coffee table. Not a single word of greeting, just a sideways glance and a sigh thick with disgust. "You made a real mess this morning," she said, flicking one of the policy pages like it disgusted her. "People are talking." I took a deep breath. "You humiliated me. In public. For what?" She scoffed. "Oh, stop it. Don't act like you didn't deserve it. You've had that damn policy locked up like it's some sacred scroll. It's called planning, Dad. Grown adults do it all the time." The folder was thinner than I remembered. A few documents were missing, intentionally or misplaced, I couldn't tell. But her eyes were sharp. She wasn't here to apologize. She came prepared for a takedown. "I'm not dead," I said, each word slow and deliberate. "And I sure as hell won't be bullied into handing over my blood while I'm still breathing." "Bullied?" Her laugh was venom wrapped in silk. "You're being dramatic. It's just a signature. If you care about this family, you'd make sure we're taken care of. That's all I'm asking. Your husband works. You work. The boys are in private school. Who's struggling?" "That's not the point," she snapped. "You're sick. You won't admit it, but you are. I've seen the prescriptions, the hospital bills. You've got one foot out the door and nothing in place to secure the rest of us. What happens when you go? We're stuck with your debt?" I stared at her. That was the shift, the subtle slip of her mask. She didn't say if. She said when. Her mind was made up. "I've taken care of my affairs," I said quietly, walking over and closing the folder. "You don't get to declare me dead before I'm cold." She slapped the folder open again. "You're being selfish." That word landed hard. Not because it hurt, but because it came from the same daughter whose tuition I'd paid, whose first car I bought, whose wedding I financed even when I had to take out a second mortgage. "Selfish?" I echoed, barely recognizing my voice. "I've never put myself first. Not once." She stood, brushing imaginary lint from her designer jacket. "Then prove it. Sign the new form. It names Darren as the beneficiary. It's cleaner. More secure. Less hassle for everyone." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the open folder, the once pristine papers now creased, smudged, and thinned out. There were notes in her handwriting on the margins. Arrows, calculations. Even a sticky tab marked, "Sign here." She'd planned this. Long before the brunch. Long before today. "You brought that with you?" I asked, nodding toward the pen already placed beside the page. "No," she said without blinking. "I never left it." I realized then what else was missing. My voice. My space. My place in this home. She had moved in over the last few months under the pretense of checking in, slowly rearranging furniture, taking over mail sorting, adjusting prescriptions. She didn't need my death. She was already living like I was gone. My eyes drifted to the corner of the room where a half-packed suitcase sat on the floor, mine. Shirts folded without care, toiletries shoved into the side pocket. You packed my bag, I said, blinking slowly. My own daughter packed my life into half a suitcase. She didn't deny it. Just shrugged. We thought you could stay at the rehab place in New Haven for a while. Clear your head. That wasn't a suggestion. It was an ultimatum wrapped in false concern. I walked over, zipped the suitcase shut slowly, and picked it up. Not because I accepted it, but because I needed the sound. That final, dragging zip that said, "I know what you're doing." She reached for the folder again, but I snatched it first, holding it to my chest. "No one touches this but me," I said. Her voice went flat. "You think this gives you power? Dad, this piece of paper is the only reason people still pretend to care." That one hurt, but it was a gift. Because now I knew, she'd said what she really believed. I walked to the door, folder under one arm, suitcase in the other. Before I left, I turned and said quietly, "You just made a mistake." Her head tilted. "Oh yeah? What mistake is that?" "You assumed this was the only copy." And with that, I stepped out. I didn't know where I'd go next, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't the only one she tried to fool. The congregation had gathered for Sunday's coffee hour, but I didn't expect to be the sermon. I didn't plan to stay long at the church. Just in and out, light a candle, shake a few hands, sip a weak coffee, and disappear before anyone noticed the shadows under my eyes. But the moment I stepped into the hall, I felt it, tension buzzing under the chatter, eyes glancing sideways, voices softening mid-sentence. They knew. Or worse, they thought they knew. I walked past the cookie table and grabbed a foam cup of lukewarm coffee. Steam barely rose from it, but it gave my hands something to hold. Something other than the folder tucked under my coat. I never left the house without it now. "Morning, Brother Dale," came the voice I didn't want to hear. Pastor Glenn. Kind man. Always meant well. But his kindness carried pity today, and pity sticks to your skin like smoke. He gave me that practiced church smile. "Hope you're feeling stronger." "Stronger than who?" I asked, sipping from the cup. He chuckled nervously but didn't answer. That's when I saw her. My daughter stood by the refreshment table in a bright floral dress, laughing softly with Sister May and Deacon Wright. Her voice carried just enough to be heard, just enough to land. "He refuses to plan ahead," she was saying. "Won't even talk about what happens after. It's difficult." The deacon's wife frowned. "Some men are stubborn, dear. They think planning means giving up." My daughter shook her head. "We're just trying to do the right thing. But he's making it impossible." I cleared my throat as I approached, loud enough to stall the conversation. Eyes shifted. Deacon Wright gave me a slow nod, but no one else said a word. Except her. "Dad," she smiled, like she hadn't just peeled my dignity like an orange. "You're just in time. Pastor wanted to talk about family protections." I looked at Glenn. He squirmed. Then from his jacket, he pulled out a trifold brochure: estate planning, end-of-life decisions, insurance contacts printed in blue ink. "Just a resource," he said, voice low. "We've been giving them to folks lately. No pressure." His hand trembled slightly as he passed it to me. Even the pastor's hands shook when he gave me that flyer. "I didn't ask for this," I said, louder than I meant to. Heads turned. Pastor Glenn's smile melted. "I understand. But sometimes it helps to have everything in order before." "Before what?" I snapped. "Before my daughter cashes in on a policy that isn't hers?" Silence spread like a spilled cup of coffee. Conversations died mid-word. People turned away, unsure if they should step in or pretend they hadn't heard. My daughter didn't flinch. "You're making this embarrassing for both of us." No, I said, my voice steadier now. You embarrassed me when you told a room full of strangers that I'm too stubborn to die properly. She took a step closer, the false charm fading. Then say it plain, Dad. If you're not going to sign the change of beneficiary form, just say it. Right now. In front of everyone. I pulled the folder from under my coat. Its edges were worn now, the paper inside no longer pristine. I tapped it against my palm slowly. I already said no. But if you need an audience for it, here it is. A few heads nodded. Others turned to avoid eye contact. Sister May stared at her hands like they might give her an escape. You're not thinking clearly, my daughter said, trying again to regain the upper hand. That policy was meant for the family. I am family, I said. And I'm still breathing. But you won't be forever. The line was soft, almost sympathetic, but the venom dripped beneath. We just want to be prepared. A cough sounded behind us, Mr. Halberd, the church treasurer. Then another voice, I thought he was doing better, whispered a woman I didn't recognize. She said he was terminal, someone else murmured. I looked around and realized what she had done. She hadn't just spread worry, she'd rewritten my story. From survivor to soon-to-be obituary. I turned to Pastor Glenn. You handing out these flyers to everyone, or just the ones my daughter tells you are dying? He looked cornered. We're just trying to help families be prepared. You help them bury the living now? He said nothing. That's when she played her final card, at least for this round. If you won't sign, she said loud enough for the whole room, a lawyer will intervene. You're not well, Dad. We all know it. And you can't keep holding us hostage with a piece of paper. The ultimatum had arrived. Clear. Public. Final. I tucked the folder under my arm again and left the room without another word. Behind me, I heard only silence, and the faint sound of papers rustling as the pastor put the brochures away. She thought the crowd's silence meant victory. But silence can mean something else too, they're finally listening. The bank statement on my kitchen table had one transaction I didn't recognize, and a signature that wasn't mine. The envelope had no return address. It sat in my mailbox like a quiet threat, white and plain, but I knew it didn't belong with the junk coupons and political flyers. I tore it open at the kitchen table and let the paper unfold itself. My checking account showed a recent withdrawal, $4,000 moved to an external account under a name I didn't recognize. Worse than the number was the signature line at the bottom. It was my name. But it wasn't my handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, long enough that the coffee in my mug went cold. The life insurance folder sat beside me, thinner than ever, and now I wondered what else they'd taken while I wasn't looking. I called the bank immediately. Mr. Dale, you authorized this transaction last week, the clerk said over the line, her voice far too calm. We have your signed request on file. No, you don't. A pause. I'll transfer you to fraud services. The hold music felt like an insult. I stared out the window at my daughter's car in the driveway. She wasn't home, but her presence lingered like a scent you can't scrub out. Her coffee cup was still in the sink. Her notebook, filled with budget lines and legal terms, rested beside my recliner. I hung up before fraud services picked up. I didn't need to hear more. Instead, I pulled the folder into my lap. It used to be neat, precise. A lifetime's worth of careful planning in a single place. Now, pages were missing. Some were out of order. One had a faint tear, as if ripped in anger or haste. There were sticky tabs I never placed. Notes in handwriting that wasn't mine. I ran my finger over the page that used to list my primary beneficiary, me, as a holding party. Now, it was gone. Replaced with a copy of a change request that named my daughter. No signature, just a highlighted space labeled awaiting final consent. My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to manipulate me. They were moving without me. And they were getting bolder. A knock on the door pulled me out of the spiral. It was Darren, my son-in-law. Dressed casual, like always, with that salesman grin he used when trying to hide the scent of lies. "Hey, Pops," he said, stepping in before I invited him. "Everything good?" I held the folder in my hand like a shield. "You took money from my account." His eyebrows lifted, and then he chuckled. "You're gonna have to be more specific. You've got more than one account, right?" "This one." I slapped the statement on the table. $4,000. Signed authorization. Except I didn't sign it. He glanced at it and shrugged. "Oh, that. Yeah. That was for the life insurance consultation. The firm in Dallas. We had to lock in the rates." "What firm?" "They handle early disbursements for terminal cases." "Just an inquiry, really. We didn't think it'd actually go through without your approval." "Then why did you forge my signature?" He raised his hands, mock offense on his face. Whoa, nobody forged anything. You probably just forgot. It's been a rough year, yeah? That line, that gentle dig wrapped in concern, made my hands shake. You think I forgot authorizing someone to cash out my death benefits while I'm still alive? He didn't answer. He just smiled like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't get. "Look," he said, walking to the fridge and grabbing a soda without asking, "we're all just trying to secure the future. For your grandkids. For the family. If something happens, we don't want to be left sorting out paperwork while you're on life support." "Nothing's going to happen," I snapped. He popped the can. "It already is, Pops. We're just being honest about the timeline." I stood up, folder pressed against my chest. "Get out." He paused mid-sip. "You serious? I've buried friends with more dignity than you've shown me." He looked at me like I was some antique to be sold off for parts. "You're being emotional." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm being awake. Finally." He left after that, muttering about how, "We'll talk when you're calm." The door clicked shut behind him, but I knew he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I returned to the kitchen, set the folder back down, and reopened the pages, every line, every stamp, every note now suspect. Then the phone rang. I answered without checking the caller ID. "Mr. Dale," the voice said, calm and professional. "This is Sheila from Heritage Life Insurance. I'm just confirming receipt of the updated beneficiary form you submitted last week." My heart slowed. I didn't submit anything. "Oh. Well, it's marked processed, effective immediately. Beneficiary listed as your daughter, correct?" I froze. "I didn't authorize any change," I said, gripping the counter. Another pause. "Would you like to request a hold and start an internal review?" "Yes," I whispered. "Okay. One more question, sir, just for verification. The form was submitted with a copy of your driver's license and notarized affidavit. Do you recall signing anything of that nature recently?" I looked at the folder again. At the missing pages. At the fake notes and sticky tabs. "No," I said slowly. "And I'd like to see exactly what was submitted. We'll send the copies immediately." I hung up and sat down. The folder sat in front of me, mutilated and foreign. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd erased me. If they could forge a future without me once, I had to find out what else they'd already stolen. The banker didn't even look me in the eye when he slid the paper across the desk. "Mr. Dale, I think you'd better sit down." The office was cold, over-air-conditioned like all banks are. But it wasn't the temperature that made me stiffen. It was the tone in the banker's voice. Low, dry, and strangely cautious, like he was trying not to disturb a sleeping bear. I sat. The banker, young, clean-shaven, and fidgety, didn't look at me as he pulled out a file. "We flagged something last week, but now it's processed. I wanted you to see it yourself." He slid the paper across the glass desk. It was a vacation itinerary. First-class flight to Honolulu. Beachside resort. 5-star meals. Spa appointments. Dates marked for 2 weeks from today. Paid in full. I blinked. "What is this?" He tapped the top right corner. The payment section. The travel agency's invoice clearly said, disbursement processed through Heritage Life Insurance, claim type, accelerated death benefit. "Someone filed for an early payout," he said carefully. "And listed this as a qualified expense under end-of-life quality of care planning. They paid for a Hawaiian vacation, with my death benefit?" He gave me a tight nod. "About $25,000. Not the full policy. But it was approved under a critical illness clause." I stared at the itinerary, then back at him. "Under whose name was the check written?" He hesitated. "Your daughter. She listed herself as your end-of-life caregiver." I couldn't move for a moment. It felt like someone had flipped the floor beneath me. "They toasted in Hawaii," I whispered, "before I was even dead." The banker finally looked at me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dale. It slipped past initially, but when the vacation details came through the payment system, I pulled the file. I thought you should know." My hands went to the folder in my lap. The one I'd brought like armor. I opened it. Sure enough, there it was, new paperwork, dated 2 weeks ago. Advanced disbursement, highlighted in yellow. I flipped further. A forged doctor's note. A fake declaration of terminal status. A typed affidavit that claimed I'd signed everything. But I hadn't. And yet, it had been processed. "Sir," the banker said, voice hesitant, "do you want to file a fraud report?" "No." His eyebrows lifted. "No? Not yet." I closed the folder slowly. "I want to see how deep the hole goes before I start pulling bodies out." He sat back. "I don't think you understand how serious this is. That money's gone. The agency doesn't get it back. And if they find out you didn't approve it, it could become a legal issue, for you. They forged everything. Not me." "Yes, but, from the insurer's perspective, you're the policyholder. It looks like you authorized all of it." I looked him straight in the eye. "Then let them come ask me themselves." I stood, folder under my arm, hands shaking not from fear, but from fury wrapped in ice. Before I left, I turned back. "One more thing," I said. He blinked. "Yes?" "Who notarized the forms?" He checked. Well. It says Darren Collins." "That's your son-in-law?" I laughed. Loud enough that someone in the hallway turned. The banker didn't know why that was funny. I walked out with the folder against my chest like a shield again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't protecting me anymore. It was evidence. I got home and sat down in my study, pulling out every duplicate form I'd hidden. Every original signature page. Every financial statement. Every communication from Heritage. I built a second folder, one they didn't know existed. Then I pulled out an old notary ledger I hadn't touched since the town council days. Sure enough, Darren's name wasn't licensed. Not in this state. Not in any state. They didn't just lie. They committed federal fraud. Later that night, I heard the front door open. My daughter walked in with shopping bags and the sound of laughter on a Bluetooth call. I stayed in the study. She peeked in. "You okay?" I didn't answer. She walked away without pressing further. And that silence, that comfort, was her mistake. Because people who think they've won stop watching. And I had only just started to sharpen my knives. If they could vacation on my grave, then they could bury me while I still breathed. But they forgot, I kept my real folder somewhere they'd never touch. The receptionist offered me a seat, and a clipboard with a mental competency form already filled out in my name. The waiting room smelled like lemon disinfectant and artificial trust. The lawyer's office was one of those sleek downtown places with curved walls, polished floors, and hollow greetings. I hadn't asked for this meeting, but I'd been summoned, and something told me not to ignore it. I arrived 10 minutes early. My daughter and son-in-law were already there. She smiled like we were at a reunion. Darren gave a nod, smug and lazy. I said nothing and clutched the folder in my lap, fingers stiff around the spine. The receptionist handed me a clipboard. "Just sign here, sir. We'll call you in shortly." I looked down. Evaluation of legal capacity, preliminary assessment form. Already filled in. My name. My birth date. A pre-checked box, patient exhibits signs of diminished capacity. I looked up slowly. Who filled this out? She blinked. It was submitted in advance. By your family. I stared at my daughter. You had me evaluated without my knowledge? She turned her head, not meeting my eyes. It's just a precaution. You've been forgetful. I stood, slowly. You forged documents. Stole from my account. Tried to cash in on my life. And now you're trying to paint me as senile to cover your tracks? Darren cut in. Nobody's trying to hurt you. This is about protection. We're just making sure things are done right. For who? I snapped. You? Before he could respond, the lawyer stepped into the room. Polished, 30-something, with a clipboard of her own and no patience for drama. "Mr. Dale," she said calmly, "if you'd follow me? This won't take long." I walked in alone. My daughter and Darren were told to wait. Her office was cold, lit with blue daylight and shadowed corners. She motioned for me to sit. I didn't. "I'm going to be frank," she said, folding her hands over a thick file. "Your daughter has raised serious concerns about your ability to manage your financial affairs. She's not a doctor." "No, but she's provided documentation. Diagnosis. Medication lists. Behavioral changes. And a notarized affidavit." I laughed. "Signed by Darren Collins?" Her face changed. "Yes, why?" "He's not a notary." That landed. She frowned, opened the folder in front of her. "I was told this was already verified." "Well, it's not. He forged my signature, stole money through the insurance policy, and used it to pay for a vacation, while I was still alive." "You have proof?" I set my folder on the table and opened it. Slowly, methodically, I slid out the banker's letter, the transaction details, the false doctor's note I'd received from the insurance company, and a copy of the forged claim. Each page landed like a hammer. She reviewed them in silence, flipping faster as her mouth tightened. "These are serious allegations. They're facts." She looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time since I walked in, her voice softened. "Why haven't you filed charges?" "Because I needed to know how far they'd go. And now I do." A knock interrupted us. Her assistant opened the door, pale-faced. "I'm sorry, but they've brought in someone else. A physician. They say it's a backup evaluation." I stood. "This is what they do," I said. "They stack the lies so high, you can't see daylight." The lawyer nodded once. "Let's bring them in." The next 20 minutes unfolded like a funeral for dignity. My daughter, Darren, and a gray-haired man with a clipboard entered. The lawyer asked questions. The physician asked me to count backwards from 100 by sevens. To list the months in reverse. To draw a clock. I did it all. Perfectly. But no one seemed relieved. My daughter played her role well, worried, fidgeting, tearful. Darren leaned in and used words like wandering, paranoia, and fixation on documents. The physician marked boxes without emotion. Then I made my move. I reached into my folder and pulled out the remission letter from 6 months ago. The one I'd never shown anyone. The one that proved I was not terminal, not dying, not decaying into forgetfulness. I placed it on the table. Dated. Signed. Verified by my oncologist. The lawyer read it. The doctor read it. Darren paled. My daughter didn't blink. She just said, "Then why didn't you tell us?" I leaned forward. Because I wanted to see what you'd do if I didn't. Then it happened. Darren, in a flustered motion, tried to grab the folder, to discredit it, maybe to hide something. But in the shuffle, it slipped from the table and spilled across the floor. Dozens of pages scattered. And right on top, face up, was a document stamped confidential diagnosis. Not mine. It was a fake one. One they had submitted with the forged affidavit. From a shell clinic that didn't exist. Everyone in the room saw it. Everyone knew. Even the receptionist, peeking in from the hallway, whispered something into her headset. They didn't argue my case, they erased me from it. The lawyer stood. "We're done here." But, my daughter started. "You need counsel," she said sharply. "And Mr. Dale needs protection. Effective immediately, all proceedings regarding this estate are frozen pending investigation." I gathered the scattered pages back into the folder. My daughter sat silently, no more tears. Darren didn't look at me. Outside, the waiting room was silent. But I felt the difference in the stares. They weren't pitying me anymore. They were watching the collapse. They tried to declare me unfit, but now it was their signatures on trial. And the town would know it before the week was over. I waited until they left for the store, then I pulled out the second folder they didn't know existed. The house was quiet again. My daughter had taken Darren to the store to get dinner started, but I knew the truth. They were buying time, regrouping after the failed ambush at the lawyer's office. Darren hadn't spoken a word on the drive home. She hadn't looked at me once. That silence told me more than anything they'd said. They knew the cracks had started to show. I opened the desk drawer in the study, not the top one, the second, and pulled out the real folder. Not the one they'd ransacked. Not the one they'd marked, rearranged, stolen pages from. This one had never left my sight. It held everything. The notarized affidavit of cognitive competence signed by my own doctor months ago. The original insurance policy papers. The contact details of the insurance fraud investigator I'd called 2 nights ago. And most importantly, a newly drafted amendment to my will, notarized, sealed, and ready for filing. I didn't want revenge in the loud, angry way they expected. I wanted silence. Legal. Cold. Permanent. I started by canceling every joint account. Online, in silence, with passwords they'd never guess. Gone were the backup cards she'd added for groceries. Gone was the emergency line of credit Darren had borrowed against last spring. The accounts that were once shared were now locked, isolated, and reported for unauthorized access. Then I moved on to the utilities, my name off every bill. I wasn't going to pay for the water they wasted or the electricity that lit up their lies. They'd be getting their own mail by Monday. I opened my email and sent a message to the mortgage broker. Attached was the letter transferring the house deed to a trust one controlled alone. Let them call it petty. Let them call it bitter. I called it survival. Then I picked up the phone and called Heritage Life. "This is Dale Parsons," I said. "I need to rescind the beneficiary update filed 2 weeks ago." A pause. "Mr. Parsons, the system still shows your daughter as the primary. I have proof it was fraud. And legal counsel ready to proceed. Would you like me to fax it now or wait for the subpoena?" Another pause. Then, "Please fax it. I'll bring it in myself." I hung up and smiled, not out of joy, but clarity. They tried to kill me on paper. I just erased their names in ink. The folder now held the counterpunch. Not just defense. Attack. I'd included copies of everything I'd uncovered: the bank withdrawal, the fake notary, the fraudulent travel reimbursement form. Each copy sealed, time-stamped, and ready to be filed as evidence. And as I reviewed it all again, my phone buzzed. A message from Darren. "Don't do anything stupid. It's just paperwork. We can fix this." I stared at the screen and felt that strange calm again. The kind that comes after too many storms. When the waves stop because the ship already sank, and you're swimming alone. Then I sent a reply. One line. "I fixed it already." I didn't wait for a response. I opened the safe under the bookshelf, placed the folder inside, and locked it. Then I slid the spare key into a sealed envelope addressed to my old friend Mark, retired police chief and now a private investigator. We hadn't spoken in a year, but I knew him well enough to trust one thing. He hated seeing people like me eaten alive. I texted him. "Folder coming your way. If anything happens to me, open it." His reply came seconds later. "Understood." The door opened downstairs. They were back. I closed the safe and stepped out of the study like I'd just been reading the paper. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, moving past me into the kitchen. Darren didn't make eye contact. I just nodded and walked toward the stairs. "Where you going?" she asked, voice overly bright. "To rest," I said. "Big day." She smiled, tight and uncertain. They thought they'd survived the fire. They didn't realize I'd only just struck the match. If they wanted war, I'd fight with paper. The accounts were frozen. The will rewritten. The trust filed. But I wasn't done, not until their lies were dragged into daylight. What would you have done in my place? Would you have waited, or struck first? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you're hooked. The officer didn't knock, he just stepped into my doorway with his hand already near his badge. It was just after 9 a.m. when the police showed up. No sirens. No lights. Just a black cruiser parked across the street and a uniformed officer walking up my path like he was delivering a package. I opened the door before he could knock. "Dale Parsons?" he asked. I nodded. "I need to ask you a few questions." "May I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. He walked in with that calculated calm, body still, eyes scanning, voice clipped short. Not aggressive, not friendly. He'd done this before. We sat at the kitchen table. He didn't touch his notebook yet. "Your daughter and son-in-law filed a report," he said, getting right to it. "Allegations of financial coercion. Emotional intimidation. Potential elder abuse." I blinked. "They did what?" He slid a statement across the table. "They say you've been exhibiting erratic behavior. That you've been canceling shared accounts to isolate them. That you're hiding critical medical documents and possibly altering your estate under duress." I looked down at the paper, then up at the man. He wasn't buying it. Not yet. But he had to treat it seriously. I stood and walked to the study. Opened the drawer. Retrieved the folder. I placed it in front of him like it was a court exhibit. "You'll want to see this," I said. He flipped it open slowly. One page at a time. The bank reversal. The fraud report. The forged notary affidavit. The remission letter. The legal trust reallocation. The notarized cognitive clearance. With every turn, his eyebrows rose. When he reached the travel payout and the fraudulent Hawaii booking, he whistled under his breath. Who filed this? Darren Collins. Submitted under my name. And the affidavit? Same man. Not a licensed notary. He sat back, folding his arms. You didn't press charges? Not yet. I wanted to give them the rope first. He nodded slowly, then closed the folder. You mind if I make copies of this? Take it all, I said. I've got 3 more. He smiled at that. But the tension hadn't passed yet. You understand, he said carefully, that I still have to log the complaint. Even if it's false. That means a file. A record. A visit from social services, possibly. I understand, I said. But make sure that record has both sides of the story. He paused. Then his voice changed. Less formal. I've seen this before, Mr. Parsons. Kids who think death is a financial windfall. They don't know how to wait anymore. He tapped the folder lightly. You're smart to keep this. Most folks don't. They lose everything before they even realize what's happening. I nodded. That's why I kept the original. And made copies. And filed one with my lawyer. And mailed another to an old friend who doesn't lose things. He leaned forward slightly. Do you feel unsafe in the home? I considered that question. Not in the way he meant. But something had changed. The air in the house wasn't mine anymore. The shadows didn't lean toward me like they used to. Every sound was a question. Every door opening a warning. I feel outnumbered, I said finally. He nodded. That's enough. As he stood, my daughter's voice rang out from the stairs. What's going on? The officer turned to her. Just doing a welfare check, ma'am. Her face shifted, too fast. Surprise. Then concern. Then carefully rehearsed innocence. Did he say something? He forgets things sometimes. The officer looked between us. No, ma'am. Everything seems fine. But we'll be keeping a file open for now. She looked at me, eyes dark. Not afraid, angry. She hadn't expected this to backfire. As he walked to the door, he turned back. Mr. Parsons, if you feel any pressure, financial, emotional, or otherwise, you call me. Directly. He handed me his card. I took it and nodded. Then he left. My daughter waited for the cruiser to disappear before speaking. You had that folder ready, didn't you? I've had it ready for weeks. She stepped closer. You think this little show's going to stop us? I don't need to stop you, I said. I just need the truth to walk faster than your lies. She didn't respond. She just stood there, watching me like a predator studies prey that won't die. Handcuffs weigh heavier when they're built of lies. They sent the police to break me. But all they did was give me another witness. I was barely through the gate when I heard my name, and not in a way that welcomed me. They said it was just a neighborhood barbecue. Burgers, music, some cornhole in the driveway. But when I walked through the gate, it felt more like a hearing. People smiled at me, but their eyes were doing math. Whispering minds, already fed, searching for a reason to believe the worst. The folding chairs weren't scattered, they were arranged. A line of people facing one direction, toward the grill, where Darren stood like a game show host. He was telling a story. And it's tough, you know? Watching someone you love decline like that. His memory, his decisions. That kind of pride, it's dangerous. He didn't say my name. But the crowd didn't need it. My daughter stood nearby, laughing lightly, hand resting on a cooler. Playing the role of supportive wife-daughter saint. I kept walking. Pretending I hadn't heard. Pretending I wasn't the punchline at my own funeral rehearsal. But then someone called out, loud enough for others to turn. "Hey Dale, everything okay?" We heard there was some incident with the police. I froze mid-step. All eyes on me. I smiled. Yup. Officer had the wrong house. Happens when liars call the right number. Some nervous laughs. But now people were listening. My daughter came over, tone syrupy. "Dad, don't be like that. You're just tired. Come sit." "I'm not tired," I said. "But you should be. Spinning this many lies has to wear you out." Darren chimed in from behind the grill, flipping a burger. "Why don't you relax, Pops? This isn't the place." I turned slowly, unzipped my jacket, and pulled out the folder. Held it up like a pastor with a sermon. "This," I said, "is the place." The chatter died. Everyone stared. I opened it slowly. One page. Just one. The notarized fraud affidavit. The bank's own reversal report. Simple, clean, devastating. I handed it to someone I trusted, Tom Granger. Retired postmaster. Never liked drama. Never liked lies. He adjusted his reading glasses and read in silence. Then his face changed. He looked at my daughter. Then at Darren. "You stole from him," he said flatly. "Used his insurance like a piggy bank. Then you lied about his mind?" The crowd shifted. A few stood. Someone else asked, "Is that true, Sarah?" She tried to smile, but the heat of exposure was melting her mask. "We were just trying to protect him," she said. "We thought he wasn't." "You thought wrong," I said. "You thought I'd lay down and let you bury me alive." More murmurs. I saw them look at Darren now, not with admiration, but with suspicion. Saw the way neighbors took a step back. Saw how Sister Wendy pulled her son closer. Then the twist came. From the man I didn't expect. Paul Nguyen, who ran the local funeral home. He stepped forward slowly, hand on his neck like something was itching under his collar. "I wasn't going to say anything," he muttered. "But I saw Sarah at my office. About 6 weeks ago. Said she needed preliminary estimates." The silence turned electric. "For who?" someone asked. He looked straight at me. "For Dale." No one spoke. Even the birds seemed to stop. Sarah's face collapsed. He was in treatment, we were just being proactive. Being proactive, I repeated, by pricing my casket before I was cold. Tom handed me back the folder without a word. He looked at Darren like a man realizing the meat on the grill might be poisoned. "I never signed a funeral request," I said. "Never gave permission for any payout. Never filed for end-of-life anything." More people stood now. The folding chairs might as well have been courtroom benches. Darren finally spoke. "Okay," he snapped. "So maybe we jumped ahead. Big deal. You think they wouldn't have needed that eventually? Wrong move. Too honest. Too arrogant. Too fast. They had just confessed, with 30 witnesses." Paul Nguyen cleared his throat. "There's paperwork. I can show it. If needed." I looked at Sarah one last time. "You rehearsed my funeral before I was cold." She didn't answer. She couldn't. They rehearsed my funeral before I was cold. The neighbors didn't say anything after that, but they didn't need to. Their silence had finally shifted sides. Have you ever seen someone lie so smoothly the truth didn't stand a chance, until it finally did? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. My lawyer didn't ask how I was, he asked how loud I wanted this to be. You want public? Mark asked, sliding the coffee across his desk. Or private but permanent? The retired police chief turned legal consultant didn't waste time with pleasantries. That's why I came to him. We sat in the back room of his law office. No receptionist, no fanfare, just worn carpet, walls lined with case files, and one sharp-eyed man who'd seen too many small-town sins hidden under family names. I want whatever makes them regret ever opening that folder, I said. He cracked a smile. Good. Because what you gave me? It's not just fraud. It's wire fraud. Identity theft. Insurance abuse. Forged medical documentation. If we filed today, they'd be in handcuffs by next Sunday. He tapped the sealed envelope I'd handed him, the upgraded folder, now with police report addendums, Paul Nguyen's notarized statement from the barbecue, and the final blow, a signed confession from the bank clerk admitting she'd been misled into processing the early disbursement. You ready for this to go loud? Mark asked again. This won't be a quiet courtroom hearing. People talk. The paper picks it up. Your name, her name, Darren's, everyone's laundry ends up flapping in the street. I didn't even blink. Good. Let it flap. Mark nodded and pulled out 2 forms. Restraining order. Fraud complaint. He passed me a pen. I signed both without hesitation. And just like that, my counterstrike began. 3 days later, they served the papers at 7:45 a.m. I didn't have to witness it. But I did. I stood behind the curtain in the living room as the officer, same one from last week, stepped out of his cruiser and rang the bell. Sarah answered. Still in her robe. Coffee in hand. He said a few words. Her face shifted instantly, no tears, just shock melting into cold fury. Darren stepped into the frame just as she slammed the door in the officer's face. The officer turned, caught my eye through the window, and nodded once. Message delivered. Later that afternoon, the lawyer called. They're rattled, Mark said. And now they're exposed. The investigator from Heritage Life has officially opened a fraud claim. They're freezing the policy. You're reinstated as sole beneficiary and account controller. They're also sending someone to your house next week for a full audit. I let out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And the restraining order? Filed. Darren can't be within 300 feet of you or your financial records. Sarah? She's included under the fraud claim, not the order, yet. Yet. That word carried a warning. Mark continued, by the way, I spoke with the DA's office. They're interested. Not just civil. This could go criminal, fast. I looked down at the folder. Sealed now. Legal tabs poking from its sides like blades. What began as a symbol of my protection had become a sword. And the town was already whispering. At the grocery store, people nodded who never used to. Some clapped me on the shoulder. A few offered quiet apologies they never voiced aloud. Didn't know, one man said softly near the bread aisle. They always seemed so, in control. They were, I replied. Of everything but the truth. Even the cashier didn't ask if I needed help bagging. Just handed me the receipt with 2 words that meant more than any court ruling. You good? I nodded. I am now. The next day, a courier arrived with a silver case. Inside was the final draft of the policy amendment, signed, sealed, reinstated. Beneficiaries cleared. All forged entries struck out. Audit trail preserved. The courier handed me a second envelope. It was from Heritage. A note inside read, "Thank you for your vigilance. We apologize for any harm caused during this process. Your file is now classified as high-risk, external manipulation attempt. If you wish to permanently close the policy and reassign value to charity, we are ready to assist." I smiled. That choice would come soon. But not yet. First, I needed them to see everything crumble. That night, Darren knocked on the front door. Alone. No Sarah. Just him, sweating, shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. I stared at him. "You filed for my death payout." He looked down. "We were desperate. You priced my coffin." "That wasn't me, Sarah," she said. "It was a backup plan." "You're the backup plan now," I said. He reached for his back pocket. I tensed, but it was just a folded paper. Apology letter. Statement. "I'll sign anything you want if it'll keep this from getting worse." I didn't touch the paper. "I already signed what I needed," I said. "And so did the judge." He paused. "You're going to let this ruin our lives?" I looked him dead in the eye. "You ruined your life the day you forged mine." Then I closed the door. "You ruined your life the day you forged mine." The restraining order was just the start. The real reckoning came when the cracks in their lives finally started showing, and they had nowhere left to hide. The first envelope came from a collections agency, but it was addressed to me, for a loan I never took. I used to dread the mail slot. Bills. Pre-approved scams. Fundraisers asking for donations I couldn't afford to give. But lately, the envelopes had changed. The first one came on Monday, a collections notice from a loan company I'd never heard of. $17,400 past due. Account opened under a shared family address. My address. The next day, 2 more envelopes. One from a credit card company, the other a default warning for a consolidated family account signed by Sarah. Both were under my name. But I hadn't signed anything. And the folder was getting fatter. By Thursday, I'd gathered 7 notices. Different creditors. Different dates. All under joint filings. All linked to purchases I'd never made, furniture, appliances, even a rental property in a town I'd never stepped foot in. Each time I opened one, I thought I couldn't be shocked anymore. Each time, I was wrong. They'd been building a version of me, on paper, worth more dead than alive. Friday morning, Mark called. "Credit Bureau confirms what you suspected," he said. "They used your identity. Pieced together old financials and bank info. Everything they needed was in your tax records from last year." Darren had access. I gripped the phone tighter. "How bad is it?" "Your score's shot. Temporarily. But with the fraud report and restraining order, we can begin the repair. More importantly, the lenders are turning on them now." He paused. "And Dale, they're broke." The words echoed longer than I expected. Between the cancelled access, blocked accounts, frozen disbursement, and legal costs, they're drowning. Darren's been on unpaid leave since the police report. Sarah missed 2 mortgage payments on the rental house. They were living on what they planned to steal from me, I said. Exactly. He didn't sound surprised. I didn't feel victorious. Just confirmed. That afternoon, Sarah showed up. Alone. No Darren. No smile. She didn't come to the front door. She came through the back, the same way she used to sneak in late from high school parties she swore never happened. I heard the screen door creak, then the soft knock on the kitchen glass. I let her in without a word. She looked different. Hair undone. No makeup. Eyes tired. Shoulders slumped like the apology was already breaking her spine. "I know what you think," she said. "No," I replied. "You don't." She stood near the sink, twisting her hands like she was praying. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Darren pushed it too far. We just thought, if something happened, you'd want us secure. So you started spending like I was already in the ground?" "No," she cried. "It wasn't like that. At first, we just used the access to speed things up. Bills, tuition, the business idea, but then, we couldn't stop." Tears rolled now. Not the performance kind. The scared kind. And I'd seen enough actors to tell the difference. She pulled a folded envelope from her purse. "I wrote this," she said. "A statement. An apology. I signed it. If it helps with the legal stuff, use it." She set it down on the counter. Lightly. Like it might explode if dropped. Then she looked at me, eyes red. I was wrong. About everything. I didn't speak. I just picked up the envelope, slid it open. The apology was typed. Clean. Clear. Too clean. Then I saw it. In the lower left corner, a clause. Small. Legalese. Buried. By accepting this apology, recipient acknowledges forgiveness of all financial, civil, and legal claims associated with the matter outlined. I looked up. Her tears were real. The letter wasn't. It was a trap. "You almost had me," I whispered. She frowned. "What?" "This whole thing. The crying. The letter. You just needed one moment of my weakness. One signature. One slip." She stepped forward. "No, it's not like that, I didn't write that part, I swear," Darren said. "I don't care who wrote it," I said, folding the paper and sliding it into the folder. "What matters is, you handed it to me." She shook her head. "You don't understand. We're losing everything. We needed that money. That policy, it was the only thing left." I didn't shout. Didn't gloat. Didn't comfort her. I just opened the folder, found the last empty sleeve, and slid the apology inside. "You used to come home for hugs," I said. "Now you come with fine print." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked away with the silence of someone who finally realized. The person they tried to bury is still standing. You used to come home for hugs. Now you come with fine print. They lost their credit, their income, their standing. But what they really lost, was their right to call me Dad. The pastor didn't want to hold the meeting, but the congregation insisted on it. They called it a community clarity circle. But everyone knew what it really was. A reckoning. After the barbecue fallout and the bank investigation, the gossip grew legs and sprinted through town. Half-truths spilled into pews. Whispers filled coffee shops. Side eyes passed over dinner tables like communion trays. And eventually, the congregation demanded answers, not in the dark corners of a backyard, but beneath the stained glass windows of the church that raised us. It wasn't the pastor's idea. He tried to avoid it. But people wanted a truth they could see. The church hall was full. Not Sunday full, scandal full. I stood near the front. Not in the pulpit. Not above anyone. Just next to a folding table with the folder in my hands. The same folder they'd tried to rip apart, forge, manipulate, erase. I laid it down in front of the crowd like a final offering. Across the aisle, Sarah and Darren sat 3 rows back. They hadn't been invited, but they came anyway. People noticed. And no one sat beside them. Pastor Glenn took the mic. Sometimes, he said, our flock finds itself in confusion. When that happens, we don't point fingers. We seek light. He looked at me. Mr. Parsons has something to share today. Not gossip. Not hearsay. Documents. Facts. We will receive it with grace, and we will not interrupt. He nodded. My turn. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, letting the first page rest under the spotlight. I'll be brief, I began. What you've heard, some of it is true. I had cancer. 6 months ago, I was in a dark place. I chose silence, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want pity. A few gasps. Some nodded. I flipped the next page. But what followed wasn't support. It was paperwork. Forgery. Theft. My own family tried to cash in before I had time to recover. I held up the bank fraud notice. Then the forged notary. Then the false funeral estimate. The room stayed quiet, but the air thickened. Then I pulled out the page everyone had waited for. A signature. Mine. But not. Next to it, a notarized stamp from a man who didn't exist. I passed it to the pastor. Would you read that aloud, please? He did. His voice didn't shake, but it dimmed. The below signature certifies accelerated disbursement of policy number 4721 to designated beneficiary, Sarah Parsons, citing terminal diagnosis, with attached medical justification. Signed. Dale Parsons. He paused. This isn't your signature? No. And the medical form? Fake clinic. Shuttered 2 years ago. The congregation shifted. Some murmured. Others shook their heads. Then I showed the travel receipts. The disbursement used to fund a vacation booked under post-diagnosis rest. $25,000. Gone. I didn't need to say where it went. They all knew. Then I stepped away from the table. And did something no one expected. I held up one final page. The remission letter. Dated 4 months ago. And here's the part they never saw coming, I said. I survived. A beat passed. Then another. And the room erupted, not in applause, but recognition. Eyes welled. Necks craned toward the back rows. People looked at Sarah and Darren like they were strangers sitting in the family pew. Someone muttered, "Lord, have mercy." Someone else whispered, "They tried to bury him alive." Darren stood like he might object. But no one handed him the mic. Pastor Glenn spoke again. "Thank you, Dale. You've shared more than you had to. And I believe I speak for this entire congregation when I say, your seat at this table was never in question." He looked toward Sarah. "But some seats may need to be earned back." Sarah looked down. She didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't deny. After the service, people lined up. Some shook my hand. Others apologized for staying silent. Tom Granger patted my shoulder. "You've given us all a lesson. Truth doesn't need volume. Just paper." Wendy slipped me a casserole note. "You eat tonight. Let the town carry this now." And Paul Nguyen, the funeral director, walked up quietly and whispered, "I shredded her request last week. Told the insurance company they'd need a resurrection order to see another penny." We both chuckled. Just enough to breathe. That night, I sat at my kitchen table. Folder still open. Pages now dog-eared, wrinkled, respected. Not evidence. Not protection. Proof. Of survival. Of reclamation. Of dignity. They tried to bury me under lies, but the truth came up stronger than the soil. Sarah left the church without saying a word. But I knew that silence. It wasn't shame, it was planning. And she wasn't finished yet. The reporter asked me one question before the cameras rolled: "Are you sure you want to do this, publicly?" "I'm not doing this for me," I said. "I'm doing it for anyone who's ever been betrayed by blood." The news crew set up on the courthouse steps. Just one local channel, but in this town, that might as well be national. Word of the church fallout had spread, and when they heard I was filing the final documents, they asked to cover it. Mark stood beside me, briefcase in hand, sunglasses on. In my arms was the folder. Not clutched. Not hidden. Presented. Inside. Final deed change. Formal reassignment of life insurance benefits. Fraud charges officially signed by me. And the real twist, a notarized donation of the full policy payout to the town's veteran housing program. $150,000. Gone from my daughter's future. Reassigned to strangers who'd never once asked me to die for their comfort. We didn't make speeches. Mark handed the documents to the county clerk, sealed and time-stamped. But I made sure the camera saw the moment I handed over the folder. I looked right into the lens. "My family tried to reduce my life to a transaction," I said. So I rewrote the receipt. Behind the reporter, a few people clapped. Quietly. But sincerely. One of them was Paul Nguyen. Another, Tom Granger. And off to the side, hiding in the shade of a parked car, Sarah. Watching. Not approaching. Just witnessing what she'd lost. Later that day, I got the confirmation call. "This is Jessica from Heritage Life. I'm calling to confirm that the reassignment has been successfully executed. Your daughter has been removed from the policy, and the designated charity has accepted the payout terms." "Good," I said. "One question, sir, are you aware she attempted to contest the reassignment yesterday?" I figured she would. She submitted a medical addendum, claimed the donation was made under cognitive distress. I nearly laughed. "What did you do?" "We pulled your clearance letter. And the court record of the fraud case. And? She's been flagged in our system permanently." That was it. The door she thought she could reopen, slammed. That evening, the video went live. Just a 2-minute clip. Me. The folder. The handoff. The announcement that the life insurance policy was now funding 12 units of housing for homeless veterans. The post got shared hundreds of times. In our town, that's viral. I read the comments. He turned betrayal into blessing. That man walked out of hell with a gift in his hand. God bless him. And shame on them. I didn't need the praise. But I wanted her to see it. And she did. Because the next morning, she showed up at the front door again. No tears this time. Just silence. "I know what you did," she said. "You mean what I undid? You embarrassed me." "No," I replied. "You did that all on your own." Her jaw clenched. "You think this is over?" I smiled. And said the one thing she hadn't expected. "It is, for me." Then I handed her a thin envelope. No folder. No speech. Just one letter. A copy of the revised will. Inside, her name scratched out. Under beneficiary, Veteran Housing Program, Cedar County. At the bottom, a note. Gifts are earned. Not inherited. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She walked away with the stiff steps of someone who no longer had an audience. That afternoon, I went to the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first renovated unit. The mayor thanked me. The press took photos. But I stayed behind the crowd. Watching. Breathing. Living. My legacy fed strangers who never starved me. Sarah didn't just lose the money. She lost the story she built. And when the truth rewrites the narrative, there's no second edition. They didn't knock this time, they waited on the porch like schoolchildren expecting punishment, not grace. They came just after sunset. Not in anger. Not in arrogance. But in defeat. Sarah and Darren stood on the porch like they had rehearsed something on the ride over, only to forget the lines the moment they saw the porch light flicker on. I didn't open the door right away. I watched them through the side window. Sarah held a paper in her hand again, but this time it was shaking. Darren kept looking at the ground, like maybe the answers were buried in the cracks of the walkway. Eventually, I stepped outside. Didn't invite them in. Didn't offer chairs. Just stood there. Waiting. Sarah spoke first. "We've lost everything." "I know," I said. "We're not here for money." "I know that too." She took a slow breath, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We came because we forgot who you were." Darren finally looked up. "We let greed get in the way. We saw your name on paper more than we saw you." I said nothing. She took a step forward, offering the page in her hand. "We drafted a statement. Official. Public. You can post it. Share it. Use it in court if you want. It's the truth." I didn't take the paper. She held it out longer. "We're not asking for anything. Not money. Not forgiveness. We just wanted you to hear us say it." Silence fell again. I looked at them. Tired. Ashamed. But not broken. Not yet. That part was mine to decide. I stepped back into the house without a word. They stayed frozen on the porch. I returned with the folder, thin now, almost weightless. It held only one thing. The remission letter. The original. I walked out and handed it to Sarah. She opened it with trembling fingers. She read it. Then read it again. 4 months ago, she whispered. You were already healing. I nodded. And you didn't tell us? I wanted to see what love looked like when there was nothing left to take. She blinked hard. Tears didn't fall. But her shoulders collapsed. Darren swallowed hard. We failed that test. You failed yourselves, I said. You tried to harvest the future from a man who hadn't finished living. They both stood in silence. Then, slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out one last envelope. This one wasn't legal. Wasn't notarized. Just a handwritten note. I handed it to Darren. He opened it and read aloud. I fought. I survived. On my terms. He looked up. You wrote this for us? No, I said. I wrote it for me. Sarah looked down at the remission letter again. You're not dying, she whispered. No, I said. But something did. She looked up, confused. What? My patience. They begged then. Not with words, but with silence. With eyes. With the kind of posture only guilt can build. And I felt it, that temptation. To say, I forgive you. To say, come home. To say, we'll try again. But some things don't heal by being bandaged. Some wounds need to be left open, so the people who made them remember where they hurt. I held out my hand. They looked at it, unsure. Then I gently took the remission letter from Sarah's fingers and folded it once. Twice. Slipped it back into the folder. And closed it. I'm moving, I said. Smaller place. Quieter town. They stiffened. We won't know where you are? Sarah asked. No, I said. You won't. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Darren just nodded. He understood. Because men like him only respect the sound of a door locking behind them. They left quietly. No hug. No handshake. Just the soft sound of gravel under tired feet. And for the first time in months, I sat on the porch. Alone. Not abandoned. Alone by choice. And that made all the difference. I wanted to see what love looked like when there was nothing left to take. The next morning, I dropped the folder into a fire pit, letting every forged page curl into ash. All that remained was me. The same waitress from that first day set down my check, and this time, it had my name spelled right. I hadn't been back to the diner in 6 months. Not since that day. The day my daughter laughed with a fork in her hand and a funeral in her eyes. The day I became deceased, before my pulse even missed a beat. But today, I came back. Not for the coffee. Not for the eggs. For the closure. I sat in the same booth. Window seat. Middle of the room. No shadows to hide in. The hum of breakfast chatter surrounded me. Plates clinked. Syrup poured. Life moved. And yet, I could feel it. The way people looked without turning their heads. The weight of their glances softening with quiet respect instead of judgment. The door opened. More people filed in. A few nodded toward me. Some smiled. Not pity. Recognition. The town knew now. What they did. What I did back. The waitress approached, same one from before. She looked older now. Maybe I did too. She handed me the menu, but I waved it off. Just coffee, I said. She poured. Then hesitated. I saw the news, she said. The donation. The file. She paused. I'm sorry. I nodded once. So was I. She looked down. Then placed the check on the table. I turned it over out of habit. And there it was. Dale Parsons. No jokes. No sarcasm. No deceased. Just my name. Spelled right. Alive. I drank the coffee slowly. It wasn't good. But it was mine. Earned. Outside the window, I saw them. Sarah. Darren. Not walking toward the door. Walking past it. They saw me. But they didn't stop. Darren kept his head down. Sarah glanced once, just once, but her eyes didn't hold the same fight they used to. They were just eyes now. No fire. No tricks. No war. I didn't wave. Didn't nod. Just watched them walk on by. And something inside me settled. Later that afternoon, I drove to the lake. Small place. Quiet. I brought the folder. Not the real one, what was left of it. Inside. My remission letter. The final receipt from Heritage. A photo of the ribbon cutting from the Veterans Housing Unit. I stood on the edge of the fire pit beside the dock. Held the folder open one last time. Ran my hand over the pages. Then fed them in. One by one. The paper curled. Blackened. Lifted in ash. The lies. The signatures. The threats. All of it. Gone. When it was over, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, watching the last ember fade. Back in town, they'd tell the story differently now. Not of a sick old man who lost control. But of a man who took it back. Page by page. Line by line. Family by fire. I didn't need an inheritance. I left something better behind. Truth. And truth doesn't burn. I walked out alive, with my name still mine. The folder didn't save me. It revealed them. And when the fire took it, what stayed behind was all I ever needed, my dignity. What would you have done if your own family tried to profit off your death? Would you forgive, or fight? Let me know in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe. We've got more truths to tell.